Hello, and welcome to Paths to Business Ownership. This is a panel discussion from startup to acquisition strategies. On behalf of our president, Ron Busby, our board, chambers, and our staff, thank you for attending. I'm Warren Richard Jr., outreach specialist with the U.S. Black Chambers Incorporated, affectionately known as the national voice of Black businesses. We represent over 140 Black chambers of commerce and small businesses across the nation and are founded on 5 pillars of service: advocacy, access to capital, contracting, entrepreneurial training, and chamber development. This webinar was crafted in collaboration with our chambers of commerce, providing technical assistance and resources to businesses across the U.S. with the U.S. Small Business Administration's Community Navigator Pilot Program. Thank you for your assistance in developing and sharing this program. Our team at USBC, as well as our 20 Navigator chambers, look forward to being a resource to you and your business as you navigate through this journey. Today, we welcome this insightful discussion on paths to business ownership with a panel of experts and experiences in business ownership. They will shed light on how to start your own business, buy an existing business, and acquire a franchise while addressing some of the challenges entrepreneurs face. And you will learn of the resources available to assist you with access to capital and other programs. Before we introduce today's guest, I encourage you to drop your questions into the chat, and we will address as many as possible at the end of each presentation in today's webinar. Any questions we don't get a chance to answer during the webinar, we'll make sure we get those answered after. Our distinguished panel of speakers, and I must admit, it is a powerhouse of speakers that have extremely pertinent experience and information that they want to share with you. The first, Bill Reichard, a military veteran with a BA and MBA that has substantial private sector experience in both corporate and small business arenas. He has significant experience in the nonprofit world, as he has been a SCORE mentor since 2019. Owner of Franchise Horizons, LLC since 2013. And for much of the last 10 years, he has served entrepreneurs and business owners as a franchise consultant. Our next panelist, Kimberly Way, is currently the Director of Small Business Development Center's Houston office, which is part of the University of Houston Bauer College of Business. She is a former small business owner, having owned 3 Jersey Mike's franchise restaurants in the Houston metro area. Kim's time as a small business owner gave her experience with small business lending, commercial leases, franchising, retail site selection, accounting, bookkeeping, and human resources management. She attended the University of Texas at Austin, where she received both her BS and MBA. Our final panelist, Cynthia Rhodes, is the owner and founder of Rhodes Porter LLC, a business development and back-end logistics management company. She has a 20-year background building multi-million-dollar companies in construction development and project management. She is also currently the co-owner of Rhodes Porter Logistics, a transportation and warehouse distribution company. She earned her degree from Augusta State University, known now as Augusta University, with an emphasis in economic development and public administration. And she is a SCORE national subject matter expert. It is an honor and a pleasure to have you all here today. Welcome to our roundtable discussion. Mr. Reichard will present his slides, Franchising 101. Bill?
Thank you, Warren. And in turn, it's a pleasure to appear before you folks. Um, I love to share information in ways that could be useful. I'm going to basically describe what a franchise is today and how to look at one. This is not meant to be something that convinces you to buy a franchise or not buy one. That's not where I'm coming for this presentation. Also, what I'm going to do today is excerpt from a longer, typically 60-minute presentation. I'm just going to hit the highlights and hopefully it moves smoothly. But if you want more information, I'm going to supply it to Warren after the event is over, and there'll be more information available. Okay, what is a franchise? And we're going to cover very briefly, what is a franchise? Is it right for you? Are you right for it? And how to pick the right one. Slide, please. There we go. Franchising is basically a method of distributing goods and services through a national organization. Take McDonald's, for instance. McDonald's owns their trademark and logo. If you want to become a McDonald's franchisee, you do it exactly the way they want, with all of the marketing and the trademarks and so forth. Really what you're doing when you think about buying a franchise is considering whether you want to buy a business in a box, because buying a franchise, you're essentially investing in a proven system that hopefully has been replicated hundreds, if not thousands of times, thereby reducing the number of unforeseen surprises that you might encounter. And it kind of wraps up into being in business for yourself, but not by yourself, because you always get support from headquarters. Slide, please. Okay, most people know fast food and franchises, and some think that's all there is to it. But franchises come in all kinds of business forms, from McDonald's to Gold's Gym, to budget blinds, to janitorial services, to real estate outfits like Century 21, transmission outfits like Mako, so forth and so on. Almost any kind of business that you can think of probably has a franchising opportunity, should you so desire it. All of these happen to be even in the local area where I live, and there would be even more that pertain to across the country. So don't limit yourself to thinking only about fast food. Slide, please. Okay, why does somebody consider a franchise? Let's say Sally wants to go into business. There's a woman named Sally, and she knows that she can start a business by herself or buy an existing business, and she's also become aware of a franchise. Well, why might Sally be a fit? She wants to be in business for herself. She wants to be independent, but she's not a raging entrepreneur like Bill Gates or Elon Musk, or somebody who's just burning with a new idea, and that's who they are to their core, is to start things from scratch with big ideas. Franchisees want a business that's been proven. They don't want to recreate the wheel. In many aspects or many sectors of franchising, you acquire a brand name, which is very important, like McDonald's. You get going from scratch to opening your doors a lot faster, typically with a franchise, often 90 days from the time you start the process to the time you open your doors. Of course, this includes businesses that do not require bricks and mortar and so forth, all kinds. With a franchise, you can learn lots from your fellow franchisees across the country. You work for yourself and you get to keep your own rewards, and you're not working for somebody else. And of course, with any business, including a franchise, you're building equity in it, and it's a saleable asset for you at any time, including retirement, assuming it's successful. Okay. Slide, please. There we go. There are various ways to connect to franchise ownership. One is typically you're hands-on full-time. You're there the entire time the doors are open, kind of like having a job, except it's your business, but you're fully involved in all respects. Some people then move on to still being involved at the place a great deal of the time, but not full-time. The next step, which is what most franchisees aspire to, is called semi-absentee. That means that when you get your business up and running for a few years and it's going well, then you can delegate a lot of the responsibility to a key manager or two and only show up maybe a few times a week to check that things are going on right. You keep track of the books, so forth and so on, but you're not there all the time. Passive is for the super big operators who might own dozens or hundreds of franchises, and I don't think we need to talk about that. Slide, please. I see I'm 6 minutes and 11 seconds through. Are you fit for a franchise? Buying a franchise, big decision. It's not for everyone. Everybody doesn't fit the profile. And one of the major things is, can you follow a system? Do you like having things set out for you and you follow the steps and do it? Some people might buy a franchise and not follow the steps, and that can be a cause of failure. But anyway, as you contemplate the possibility of franchise, how much money do you have to invest? Do not ever think that you can borrow all of the money needed to get into a franchise. So how much money do you have to invest? How much liquid assets do you have invest? If all of your money is tied up in a piece of land or something, it might be hard to get some money out of it. What do you really want from the business? You can be anything from just beyond a hobby to a major business owner with several franchises. Do you want to work at long hours? Do you want to have employees? Some people love to have employees, others it scares stiff. And will the franchise be your primary source of income or just add to your current income? Slide, please. Okay, some things that people looking into the possibility of franchises don't look at enough include the following. Again, cannot overemphasize, you have to have enough money. Many businesses fail because they don't have enough money to survive the launch or a bad period. And I'm going to emphasize the launch here. Some businesses are doing well and they're just about to cross the hump, but they don't have any financial reserves, so they fail even if they might have succeeded otherwise. A lot of people have to borrow money, most people do, to get their franchise going, and it involves many other considerations. Can't emphasize enough that there are various documents involved in investigating franchises, and the FDD, the Franchise Disclosure Document, is federally mandated, and you should look at it extremely carefully because it requires the franchisor, the headquarters company, to reveal all kinds of information about itself. You need to either yourself or have a close person or employee be able to handle all the financial statements, so forth and so on. Please, folks, financial statements are addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. It's not rocket science. If you don't have your numbers at your disposal, you're in a much more difficult situation. Slide, please. Okay, here are some different ways to get into a franchise. Some people, and of course, franchises basically start at sort of $40,000, $50,000 and can go up to over $1 million. Some people will buy the franchise completely out of their own personal assets. Most people need additional financing. It can be a loan from an unsecured loan from a bank. It could be a loan against equity in your house. You can have an SBA-backed loan, Small Business Administration, affiliated with franchises. There are companies that specialize in helping you get going, and you can use IRA funds, so forth and so on. SBA financing is worth almost a separate conversation. I think I'm at slide, please. I think I'm at about 10 minutes. So I'll turn it back to you at the moment, Warren.
Awesome. Thank you, Bill, for that great presentation. What I'd like to do, I know we're at the point of asking questions from the audience, but I'd like to start us off with this first question. But before I do, I'd like to read a quote from the U.S. Small Business Administration Office of Advocacy. From their website, they have this information. According to the Small Business Facts, Paths to Business Ownership is the title. And the quote started by saying about 2/3 of business owners start their business from scratch, while less than 1/4 of owners purchase the business they own. The starting method for small businesses tends to be relatively stable over time, but differs based on owner demographics. According to the report, among business owners, Black African Americans, Hispanics, and Native Americans were more likely to found their firm than purchase, inherit, or receive one. 81, 77, and 74% respectively. So, Mr. Reichart, in your experience, do you find that more Black firms are likely to start their own businesses? And what are the unique challenges to acquiring an existing business versus a franchise?
Okay, Warren, number one, I don't have any hardcore data, but I can share some experiences. As a franchise consultant, I deal with people across the country. I don't have any geographic boundaries. I would guess that African Americans make inquiries about franchises and perhaps become franchisees at about the same rate as the general population, in terms of percentages. However, I'm also a member, and you've mentioned this, as is Cynthia, a member of SCORE, and the entire purpose of SCORE is to help people start and grow small businesses. With SCORE, I would say there's a much higher percentage representation of African Americans than in those looking for franchises. Okay, one can speculate as to the reasons. Many people, I think, would perhaps hope to start a business for less money than getting in a big franchise, so forth and so on. But again, franchises versus starting small business, I do think there's a higher representation. In terms of some of the challenges about acquiring a business, and I think for this purpose, my comments would pertain mostly to ongoing businesses, franchises or not. With acquiring a business, you basically have to seriously double down on your due diligence. You really have to dig and find out what it is that you're looking to acquire. Does the business have, or have they had any legal issues that would pertain to the future? Is there any kind of do not compete provision if the owner sells and wants to open up another business across the street? Similar, you wouldn't like that. You have to find out why they're really selling their business. Huge emphasis on finances. You must somehow get actual numbers of how the business is doing. Nothing is more important. Some small businesses might be a little hesitant to give you all that, but you've got to dig as hard as you can to get the numbers. Are there any contracts that are going that need to be met? Will a change of ownership trigger any loss of existing customers? You need to find out the status of facilities. I would strongly recommend getting legal and CPA representation for thinking about buying any business. That's mostly it, but I say due diligence super, super rigorous in terms of buying an existing business, especially a small one.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Just want to ask the team, is there another question from the audience? I don't see one. I do see a comment, question, can we share the link to the data mentioned? I can say this, I don't have it handy right now, but as I mentioned, all you have to do is just look up the source. Again, it is the U.S. Small Business Administration Office of Advocacy. And it's in reference to paths to business ownership. That Office of Advocacy has a lot of data and a lot of information. I'm sure it's easily found through Google. All right, well, thank you for that question. A second question I'd like to ask, well, let's see. Actually, I think we'll probably go on to the next speaker. All right, so let's see. The next presentation is Miss Kim Wei. Kim, take it away.
Okay, thanks, Warren. I think Warren mentioned earlier that I am the current director of the Houston Small Business Development Center. And just so everyone knows, I will, at the end of my talk, give you guys a way to contact your own local small business development center. There are small business development centers across the country in every state, so they're accessible to virtually anyone. But I'm also a small business owner, a former small business owner. I actually just very recently sold my business. And so some of the things I'm going to talk to you about today, I've pulled from my own experience of becoming a small business owner. So a couple of things, before you go into business for yourself, there's obviously a lot of things that you want to consider when starting your own business. And this is certainly not an exhaustive list, but these are some of the key items that I think are important to consider when looking to go into business for yourself. Number one, do you have a great business idea or a special skill? Bill mentioned earlier, are you one of those hardcore entrepreneurial folks? I don't think you necessarily need to be Elon Musk, but do you have an idea or a skill that can be turned into a business? Are you a risk averse, or do you have a high level of risk tolerance? If you're like me, I'm fairly risk averse, so I'm not willing to take on a whole lot of financial risk. How much time can you devote to the business? I think Bill covered that in his section as well, but that's really important when you're trying to determine what your path to business ownership is going to be. And then certainly not the last thing you need to consider, but something very important is how much money do you have access to? How many of your own personal funds do you have access that you can invest, as well as are you going to be a good candidate for securing capital, whether it be through a loan or perhaps investment from outside investors? You want to, next slide? Okay, so I actually have this here. These are a couple of businesses that I'm personally familiar with, and I thought they were great examples of businesses where the owner had some sort of idea or particular form of expertise. So I love this business on the left, RV Masters. This is a couple I met several years ago when I was actually searching for a business myself. Bill and Gloria, they were a married couple. Bill was actually an engineer that was working in oil and gas services. But as a family, they were very avid RVers. They liked to camp a lot. And Bill was very frustrated because anytime his RV needed to be serviced or repaired, he felt like he was never able to find somebody who was qualified or could do the work or could be reliable. And so he ended up doing all of the work himself. Well, Bill turned that skill that he had, that wasn't his profession, but he did have a skill. It was really a self-taught skill. And he also had an idea because he identified a gap in the marketplace. There wasn't anyone around. This is a business that's in the Houston area. He didn't feel that there was anyone in the Houston area that was servicing the RV community. So he turned that into a business. Bill and Gloria actually recently sold their business last year. It was a very successful business, very profitable business, and they were in business for 20 years. They sold about a year ago because they retired and they wanted to spend more time with their grandchildren. But I thought that's a great example of, a business idea or a special area of expertise that's not necessarily at the Elon Musk level. That's something that sounds a little bit more achievable. And then this business here to the right, I thought it was just a great little business. I recently ordered some jewelry off of Etsy from a business owner. Her business is called Jill Makes. But again, she has a special skill and she turned it into a small business. Next slide. All right, next is risk tolerance. Everyone has their own degree of risk tolerance. And sorry, my slides are a little bit messed up, but one of the advantages of acquiring an existing business, and not necessarily a franchise, but an existing business, is they do have historical cash flow. They should have historical financial statements. And at minimum, they should have historical tax returns. So to Bill's point, you can and are able to do your due diligence when acquiring a business so that you have not a guarantee. There's never a guarantee, but obviously you're going into it with a lot more information than if you're starting from scratch. Franchises, from my perspective, I would say they're somewhere in between. It's a proven business model, as Bill said, but there's certainly no guarantees in franchising, and even some of the best franchising concepts like Taco Bell would be a great example. I've seen Taco Bell's fail, so you definitely still have to have the business skills and the wherewithal to make it successful. Not all new businesses that are your own idea come with a lot of risk. You can start a small business. A great example would be, if I started a landscaping company, assuming I have the skills, while that's my own business, I certainly know that that's a business model that does work in my area, and the initial investment isn't necessarily significant. All right, next slide. All right, next is time and money. I feel like every decision ultimately comes down to time and money, but it's so important to ask yourself, how much time and money do you have available to commit to your business? I'll give you a personal example of the Jersey Mike's franchises that my husband and I owned. That's one of those franchises where you really need to make a full-time investment in the business. But at the same time, in order to qualify for SBA financing, you also have to show that you have income. So what my husband and I did was, my husband left his full-time job and managed the day-to-day operations of the business in the beginning. And I kept my full-time job so that we would have income coming in for our family, as well as so we would have income to show the bank when we applied for our SBA loan. But not every business opportunity is going to require a full-time commitment. Etsy and Shopify businesses are a great example of businesses that can start as a side gig and then turn into something bigger once your sales grow. And then obviously money is so important. You can't invest in a highly capital intensive business if you don't have access to funds, and or if you don't have access to funds as well as are able to qualify for either a loan or get some sort of investor financing. Okay, next page.
Whoops. Can't get rid of me.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, you're on. 2 more pages. One more. Okay, perfect. So what I did here was, I was just going to very briefly walk you through the process that my husband and I took when we decided that we wanted to go into franchising, and sort of how we went through the process from the beginning until the very end when we opened up our first location. We asked ourselves a lot of the questions that Bill presented earlier when we were trying to decide if we were going to invest in a franchise. We actually did look at acquiring a business as well. I worked with a business broker, but we really weren't able to find an existing business that would really met what we were looking for, really met our needs, and really matched our skill sets. So we decided pretty early on that we wanted to invest in a franchise. So from there, we went and did a ton of research on all the different franchise options that were available out there. Bill, had I known you, I would have called you and asked for your assistance, but I did not know that you existed at the time, because you probably could have saved us a lot of money. But, we probably looked through hundreds and hundreds of franchise concepts to come up with the ones that we thought were going to meet our needs and be the best fit for our background and skill set. From there, we actually chose 4 concepts. I have the logos of the 4 concepts that we chose at the bottom. And once we chose those 4 concepts, we started with initial meetings with all of the franchisors. We did get the FDDs, which is the franchise disclosure documents from all of the franchisors, looked through all of the franchise disclosure documents, and then really evaluated each concept based off of, was it going to be a good fit for us? Did we have a really good feeling about their business model? Did we think they were going to be a successful franchisor in the future? What type of training and support did they give their franchisees? So once we did that, we actually then narrowed it down to 2. And the last 2 that we evaluated were the ones I have here below, which was Camp Bow Wow and Jersey Mike's. And from there, we did what I call like heavy duty due diligence. We met with the senior leadership of each of the companies. For Camp Bow Wow, that meant that we traveled to Denver, which is where they're headquartered. And we met with all their senior leaders for a couple of days. With Jersey Mike's, not only did we have to meet all of their senior leaders, but we were required to work in a local Jersey Mike's store for a day with one of their corporate representatives. They were evaluating us, evaluating how we interacted with employees, how we interacted with customers. Because at this point in the process, the franchisor is interviewing you as much as you're interviewing them, because they want to make sure that you're going to be a good fit for their brand and that you're going to be successful in your business. And another thing we did, and Bill already mentioned it, but I can't stress this enough, we met with a lot of their existing franchisees. So other folks that were already in the business had experience with that particular concept, so that we could understand what we were really getting ourselves into. So I think we mentioned earlier, the decision we made, we ended up moving forward with Jersey Mike's with our choice. There were a lot of things that factored into that decision, but I'll just give you some of the top 2. Number 1 was when we did the numbers and the financial analysis, we felt like the return on investment was a lot stronger with that concept than the other concepts, as well as the initial investment to open 1 Jersey Mike's location was about half of what the initial investment was to open a Camp Bow Wow. So again, there were a lot of things that went into that decision, but those were some of the keys that went into that decision. And the irony is, when we started the process months earlier, I told my husband, the one thing I don't want to do is a restaurant. I absolutely don't want to do a restaurant. And then we ended up choosing a restaurant, but it ended up being the right choice for us. So then here you see it. I put a picture of the day that we installed the sign outside of our first location. It was a very exciting day. From the time we signed our franchise agreement to when we opened up our first location, it took about 10 months. That's probably pretty average for something the size of a Jersey Mike's. To Bill's point, if there's not real estate involved or brick and mortar, it can be very quick. I know that, with Camp Bow Wow, I think when we talked to them, the average time from franchise agreement signature to having your location open was about 2 years. So the timeframes can be very different depending on what you pick. Next slide. So this is just some resources available to you. Again, where do you start? I know it can be very overwhelming when you're trying to figure out what your path to business ownership should look like. So I would encourage you, if you've got questions and whatnot, to reach out to your local small business development center. I put the website here. So what you can do is you can go to americassbdc.org. Enter your zip code, and it will actually put you in touch with your local small business development center. But we can provide services such as no-cost business advising. We do a lot of training and events. We do a lot of assistance when you get to the point if you're going for an SBA loan. We can help with things like loan packaging. And then one thing that I think is a big help, one thing I did not get help with when we opened up our first location and made a lot of mistakes with, is all of the little ins and outs of business ownership, like registering your LLC and getting your federal EIN and permits and taxes and things like that. So there's just a lot of no-cost assistance that you can get from your local SBDC. Next slide. And then finally, I did put a few other websites that I think are really good. There's obviously a ton of resources out there available to you in terms of researching small business opportunities. One of my favorites is SBA.gov. That's the Small Business Administration's website. They've got an enormous amount of information from anything from franchising to how to evaluate a business opportunity. So I would just encourage you to explore all the resources that you have available. And with that, Warren, I will turn it back over to you.
Okay, great. Kim, thank you so much for that information. I just want to ask a couple of questions. I think we're doing well on time. First of all, how difficult was it for you to secure financing for your franchise acquisition? And how were you able to overcome some of those initial challenges in that area?
That's a great question. The short answer is I would say it wasn't easy, but it wasn't incredibly difficult as well. And I can elaborate on what I mean by that. Some franchises are, for lack of a better word, they're sort of pre-approved when it comes to SBA financing. So some of that heavy lifting has already been done for you. So Jersey Mike School is one of those pre-approved franchises. So when we approached a bank, we didn't have to prove out the concept. A lot of times you've got to provide your business plan and you've got to prove out the concept. That being said, SBA loans are very complex, they're very cumbersome, and I used to joke that it required you to provide them with everything, including your firstborn child and maybe even your secondborn child.
Right.
So, and if you haven't been in small business for yourself, there's a lot of things that, we weren't really familiar with at the time, like they're going to want to see pro forma P&Ls for you, for example. So I wish I had known about the Small Business Development Center at the time, because that's actually one of the things that we assist our clients with, is we can help them with the pro forma P&Ls and all of those things that are required that go into a loan package. We had actually worked with a broker that specializes in connecting franchisees with small business lenders, and they did assist us with the loan packaging ourselves, because I do know some folks that went into it without a specialist assisting them, whether it be like an SBDC or a broker. And if you've never done it before, there's just a lot of stumbling blocks, and it can take a lot of time, and if you don't have the proper guidance.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for that. I see Cynthia shaking her head. Yes, she can relate to that. She knows something about that. So great. Thank you. And it's just really good to hear that SBDC can really help in reference to that, particularly with preparing, the documentation. We know that's a challenge for a lot of businesses. They just need the kind of direction and hand-holding in terms of preparing data and the paperwork. Let's see. I think we might have a question. Let's see. We have a question. Raina, I think it's pronounced. Did you start a franchise as an individual or under a LLC?
So we started under an LLC, and that was because we wanted to separate ourselves from a liability perspective as much as possible. And then actually, when we opened our second or third locations, we opened unique LLCs for each location. Again, it was mainly just to separate liability as much as we could.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for that. All right, well, let's go to our next speaker, Ms. Cynthia Rhodes. She will talk to us about business startup, as well as how to impact the bottom line.
I like that. So
Ms. Rhodes?
Yes, so let me just say, I am also a SCORE mentor. I started as a SCORE mentor maybe about 2 years ago, right at the pandemic. And at the start of the pandemic, rather. And it was because our business was getting a lot of calls in asking about pivoting and how to actually get their business jump started. And they weren't right in that they weren't ready to get started. And so it was a lot of pro bono work. And so SCORE was just the right fit for me. And so I would tell everybody, that I'm more so of a specialist and being a generalist and small business. So my background is in business development and management, with a concentration more so in actual economic development. That's the construction, the actual logistics, supply chain, processes and everything like that. So that's pretty much my background. We were building affordable homes. So that's how I know Warren, and so became a broker to sell the homes that we were actually building. So I also help with minority certifications and everything like that as well. So, okay, next slide, a little bit about me. Okay, so we've basically already covered these. Kim and Bill, they did a tremendous job of what you need to do in order to launch out and say that you want to start your own business. And so I basically go through that the basic questions. Why am I starting? What type of business do you want to actually start? Who's going to be involved with that business? And when do you plan to open, or when do you plan to launch? Where will that business be located, whether that be online or in a brick and mortar? But most importantly, how much money that you're going to need in order to get started. A lot of what Bill and Kim actually said had to do with the actual finances. And one of the things that really, triggers for me is when I started a business, my business, I was a single mother. And so all of these online, different types of businesses you can start now, you couldn't do then. And so this is what most African-American or minority people run into is, number one, how much money they need in order to live and sustain, but then how much money you're going to need as far as business is concerned and then to operate that business. And a lot of times it's the bootstrapping or the lack of resources or capital that you have personally that hinders you from actually starting either a franchise or purchasing another business because the assets were not there. I personal story again, knowing how minorities actually move forward. I grew up with my grandmother sleeping forward to a bed in the middle of the house. So I get where there's not any capital or assets to pull from. And then if you don't have a W-2 or a job in order to help you build that business, it's really going to be kind of tough. So then you have to ask yourself, are you committed to the business for the long haul to get it up and running? One of the things Kim said about her business was how long it took her and her husband to do the research. That was, a good amount of time. And then from research, signing, and then opening, she said a whole nother 10 months. So that's a really big deal. So what a lot of businesses actually tell you, or people that help you with opening your business, is, hey, let's just get it started. Bill had a slide and he says, franchises are the business in the box. And this is what we look at. This is what they say. You need your business name, identification number, EIN, which is free, your business license, the licenses you need to operate, business bank account, location, how are you going to do it? And then some type of web presence, your marketing, right? So we call that the business box. Yes, please go to the next slide. Oh, boom. So we coined this the business box. Everything you need in order to actually have a business, this is the box. But what it does not do is tell you how do you put those revenues in the box, what process you're going to need in order to move, meaning more so that workflow. Having a franchise gives you these things, which is the step-by-step of what you need to do and a proven concept on how to make money. That brand and logo, that name recognition actually brings that to you. But if you're starting your own business, number one, you're going to actually have to prove not just the image and the brand, but actually the concept to make money. And sometimes that's the hardest part, is having that research, having that information that it's going to take to say this brand or this company, this service product can actually make money. One of the biggest things is Kim showed you like the Etsy and the Shopify, having your own business start there. That's marketplaces. These are areas where you're basically standing in that the vendor booth and saying, hey, stop by my shop. So go to the next slide. So what we like to tell people is, how do you focus on the bottom line? How do you actually impact that? So there's a growth strategy, which is your business development plan. And again, the workflow and the process of that. So how will you make money? Before you even start your business, before you jump in and purchase your LLC, because again, it's so easy to do, before you get your EIN number, the thing is find out what kind of business you're going to have, and then say, how will this business make money? Where will my clients come from? And most often, this is the type of plan. A lot of times they say, well, Miss Cynthia, can you help us with the business plan? Well, and you can go to the next slide. The business plan should actually consist of the basics that you're going to need in order to make money. That's your management. Who's going to be operating the business? Is it going to be just you by yourself, or will you have someone else to help you out? One of the first questions loan officers usually ask is, do you have experience running or operating this type of business or service? Well, if you don't have those capabilities, then it's going to be best that you bring in someone with that expertise. So again, how are they going to be paid, and how is that going to work? Your sales and marketing plan, and how are you going to secure the customers? Again, in numbers, because we only talk business in numbers. So how will you plan to get and acquire not just one customer, but ongoing customers? And as social media, just putting it on social media is not a plan. It's securing those customers. If you say you're going to sell 500 subscriptions or whatnot, then guess what? We have to find out how we are going to secure those subscriptions and where did that number come from. And that becomes the research that you're going to actually need to build the financial plan, which again, forecasting the sales and the expenses for that. And then, of course, the strategic plan, which we call logistics, which actually puts all of these things in play, which is the process in order from sale to actually in the customer's hand. Next slide. So you should not go into business alone. The first things you would want to do is, like Kim said, is Bill as well, is having your team or your resource team together. This is your banker. Where do you get your money from? Where is that usually going to come when you bootstrapping? That's going to come from your job. Kim said that specifically. Husband quit, I kept my W-2. And so there has to always have some type of revenue coming in, and your banker is going to understand that, because it's easier to get a loan when you have a W-2 income. There isn't a business credit that you can get because businesses don't pay bills. People pay bills. So you need to be make sure that there's some type of income, and know that that loan is going to come based off of income and assets that you already have. So that becomes having an accountant in your corner, having your insurance, and especially if you're going through and trying to be a contractor, bonding again through insurance is going to be important. And those things all come through revenue and assets, and having those things. And then of course your attorney, and having someone to actually read that fine print for you. I promise you, and I know this 100% firsthand and based off of experience, that you want to find these people before you need them, because everything is going into compliance. And so the resources, and I advocate 100% for SBA and SBA resource partners, SCORE Business Mentors, which again, Bill and I are part of. Kim is part of the Small Business Development Center, the Women's Development Center, and the Veterans Business Center. There's a vast amount of resources in order for you to take advantage of that are free for you to get started. But you have to start with, again, that first slide, which is what type of business you're going to go into and how will that business make money. Those are the things that you really have to hone in on prior to the big wow and the big idea, asking someone to invest or finance your idea. I know that that's a lot. There you go.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, that, oh, wow. Cynthia, thank you so much. I mean, you know, you said it, and you really, all three of you really brought the sauce, you know, really brought the pertinent information that I think our audience want to hear and learn of. And you did a great job. So a quick question from a YouTuber: how do you conduct a feasibility study for orbital space manufacturing or any other type of franchise in the parentheses? And I guess that question could be for Cynthia, but it could be answered by any one of you, actually.
Orbital space franchise?
Yes.
There are professional market researchers in business. I've never researched before for a orbital space enterprise, but if I were doing it just off the top of my head, I'd want to see if there's any competition, which could be daunting on the one hand. On the other, it could suggest business is available. Maybe there's room for a number. So I would want to check and see if there are any peers on the field. And then I would probably try to contact a professional market researcher.
And that, yeah, I would piggyback off of that, because that's such, I'm believing again, because that could just be a title like real estate. There's so many different aspects of it. So that would have to be offline, but creating a feasibility study always starts with, again, number one, what is the service? And then two, who is the client? What are you doing and how do you make money off of those things? And then build that concept or strategy around that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you both for that. Yes, absolutely. Because it whether it's any type of industry, I know the question came specifically for orbital space manufacturing, but typically, regardless of what that business is, regardless, the person is asking a feasibility study, but really that's part of the due diligence in terms of the research. And so your answers were very pertinent. Thank you so much.
There's also a ton of data available from the federal government. I don't know if exactly how pertinent that would be in this case, but the government keeps statistics in great volumes in all kinds of ways.
Yes, absolutely. Quick question. Cynthia, you talked about bootstrapping, and I think that the audience would certainly understand what that is. And then there is the question of, if you could respond, what can go wrong in a business acquisition, and can you share some general steps to recover?
So there's a lot of things that can go wrong with an acquisition. So because you're number one, and Kim and Bill, please jump in here, because the due diligence is exactly like purchasing a franchise. I mean, 100% the exact same thing, except for proven concept. And again, because you're going to, and disclosure, because they may not give you all of the information that you're going to need as far as acquiring, because not only are you acquiring that business and you're acquiring their debt, you're acquiring your own debt for purchasing, and what that's going to do to the balance sheet. It's going to be really important. Pivoting from that, though, again, it's just a matter of debt. These are specific questions that you would have to really do a deep dive into in order to make to help them move forward with a strategy. But I believe, and Bill, again, correct me if I'm wrong, the purchase is exactly like the franchise, except for the concept and the due diligence requirements.
You're right. And as I said a couple of times, it's even more rigorous when you're trying to buy an existing business, because of new franchise, the federal government forces the franchisor to give you a lot of information. You're buying an existing business, you have to dig harder. And I would reiterate that maybe getting an attorney and a CPA involved before you sign anything would be probably money well spent.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you to our gracious panelists for disseminating their wisdom. If you missed the welcome at the beginning of today's webinar, we indicated that any questions we did not get a chance to answer during the webinar, we'll make sure we get those answered after the webinar. We invite you to give us your feedback on today's session. Just scan the QR code you see on the screen, and you can also go to surveymonkey.com/R/biz-future, as you can see there, to do that. Thank you for attending Paths to Business Ownership. This was possible through our work with the SBA Community Navigator Program, funded in part through a grant with the U.S. Small Business Administration. A tremendous thank you to our guest speakers. Bill Reichart, franchise consultant with the Kimberly Way, director of the Small Business Development Center's Houston office, and Cynthia Rhodes, business consultant with Rhodes Porter LLC. And our community navigator Chambers for advocating for Black businesses, and to you, our viewers, for sharing in the discussion. USBC introduced Buy Black, the only certification program with a business directory providing businesses that certify access to private and public procurement opportunities, highlights, and other benefits. This online program can help prepare you for the contracting space as a documents preparation guide. Certified today by visiting usblackchambers.org/certification. Join us for future events such as Verizon Presents Small Business Digital Ready Program, Friday, March 17th, 1 p.m. Eastern. Government versus municipal contracts. What's the difference and how to qualify? That's Thursday, March 23rd at 1 p.m. Eastern. And finally, working toward work-life balance, a mental health conversation, Thursday, March 30th at 1 p.m. Eastern. For more events like these, regularly visit and certify for upcoming events at usblackchambers.org/webinars. Follow us on social media at usblackchambers.org. If today's forum prompted additional questions and interests, feel free to contact us at programs@usblackchambers.org. Thank you for joining us today. We appreciate your time and your attention to the information that was shared.